Third, deception. Deception is the pleasure of the sin will outweigh the pain of the consequence. The pleasure of the sin will outweigh the pain of the consequence. That is not the truth. When you sow, you might sow some little immediate pleasure. A seed. But what happens when you take, let's say you take a cucumber seed. Most of you have these New Jersey gardens, and I've grown cucumbers. You put one little cucumber seed in the ground, and months down the road, how many cucumbers and how many cucumber seeds you got coming out of the ground? Well, maybe you don't have too many if you grow these hybrid seedless cucumbers or whatever. But if you grow just the seeded normal cucumbers, right, you get a whole bunch of cucumber and a whole bunch of seed just from one little seed. Just from one little seed. And that's why it says in Hosea, "For they have sown the wind, and they shall reap." What's the end of that verse? The whirlwind. The whirlwind. You see, because when you sow something, you reap the same type of thing, but you reap it in a greater quantity. That's an important thing to remember. So the decision, a seed, is a crossroad in your life. You may go one way or another way, and then that can cascade. That can bring on more and more. Just a small sin. And on the other side, there's a corollary to this lie, and that is the sacrifice will not be worth the reward. Right? That's not in your notes. So if you're taking notes, you can add that to point line number 3. The sacrifice will not be worth the reward. And Jesus said in Matthew chapter 19, verse 29, "And everyone who has left houses and brothers and sisters and fathers and mother or wife or children or lands for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold and inherit an eternal life." So the flip side of it is if you sow to the Spirit and you sacrifice to sow to the Spirit, that you will reap much, much more than you sow. I remember this fellow at work one day I came in, and apparently this fellow had drunk a good bit the night before, and he was hanging his head over a garbage can, and, you know, I don't want to even make the sounds and the gestures that were disgusting in that room, but I mean, he was suffering from this hangover, and you know, he was going through a lot of agony. And maybe I shouldn't ask this. Maybe it was good that I asked this. I don't know. But I said to him, I said his name, and I said, "Do you think it was worth it? Do you think it was worth it to drink and live it up the night before? To diet up the night before, and to suffer the way you're suffering?" And he just got angry that I even asked the question. And I think he said sarcastically, "Of course it was." And then later he said, "Of course it wasn't, but you don't think that when you're drinking." And I started to think about that. And I think the reality is that in people's experience, they know their own bodies, they know what's going to happen, they know the hurt and pain that comes. And I think the reality is that they do believe that the pleasure of the sin is worth the pain of the consequence. They've swallowed the deception. As they're in pain and as they're in agony, they're saying, "Of course not, of course I know that." But I think the reality is, whenever we go into sin, whenever a Christian like us goes into sin, we struggle with this truth. The truth is that the consequences of our actions are going to outweigh the pleasure that we had in the sin. They are. And those consequences are going to be devastating. Somebody was saying that I was listening to was saying that in the Jewish mind, for instance, the sin of murder, when you murder a Jewish person, like in the Holocaust, it is not just that person that dies. It is the seed that they would have had that dies with them. And their seed, and their seed, and their seed. So the whole idea is that something done in seed form will grow up, and the consequences, the weight of that will be devastating. Just imagine if Isaac had been killed, or if Jacob had been killed. There would be no Israel nation. All those people would be gone.